Well, been a rough week, I think, for the country, particularly for our friends down south. Like most of you, I'm sure, I've been thinking about the people of Houston this week. Perhaps you have relatives or friends, loved ones who have been in harm's way, and I pray and hope that they have been carried safely through this time. On my mind, of course, as I'm thinking about what to say this morning, and so what came to me, I guess, as a theme was, what will it be like when the flood comes to our town, to our lives? What will we be like when the flood comes? It's not impossible, I don't think. Has there ever been a flood in this valley? I don't know. I've lived here a lot of my adult life, most of it. Rick, ever a flood around here? Worst thing I remember, huh? Tornadoes, I remember. One time we had a train crash out here, and we all had to breathe gas for a while. That probably will kill us eventually. Remember that? I forget what they called that. Stunk to high heavens. I remember that. What will it be like when a flood comes to our town, to our lives? How do Christians respond to suffering is really the question. How do we, as Christians, respond to death, to loss, to destruction, to danger? When danger comes to our loved ones, to our community, how do we respond? Do we run away? Or do we wade in where the danger is? Today's text in the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew says, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed. Then Jesus told his disciples, it says, quote, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it." Which is difficult, I think. As difficult for us as it was for the disciples. Right? They have just been given the keys to the kingdom, Peter has, just a few verses before. And now he's being told, well, it doesn't exactly work like that. This is a transition text. When you hear it actually begins from that time on, Jesus began. So Jesus is transitioning in the text from a universal teaching to the crowds about the kingdom of God to now specific teachings to the disciples about what it means to follow Christ, what it means to be a disciple. And what is he teaching them about? Jerusalem, suffering, death, resurrection, atonement, being reunited to God, which is understandably indecipherable for the disciples. Like, they don't get it. They're like, what are you talking about? We're heading into Jerusalem. It's going to be a great triumphant thing. And Peter's like, you just said I'm the rock. And Jesus says, no, you got it wrong. If you stand in my way of going to suffering, you are not the rock of faith. You are, in fact, a stumbling rock. He calls him Satan, but we think of that as a devil. But what he really means is adversary. He's saying, listen, get behind me. Right? Which, notice, he's not casting him out. He's saying, follow. Come around behind me. I'm leading. And don't get in the way, or else you are going to cause us all to stumble. Okay. He's not teaching them about leadership. He's teaching them about the dangerous work of discipleship, which is a way of living where Christ's mission becomes our own mission. And I'm asking you, asking us, asking myself, if I have in fact made that transition where Christ's mission has become my own mission. Being a disciple is learning to follow, learning to submit, learning to obey, even to suffer, which, I think you'll agree with me, is the exact opposite of what the world teaches us. Is it not? Yes, it is, Mark. It is the exact opposite of what the world teaches us. To lead, to get out front, to succeed, to count, to be the one with the most things, right? That's not what Christ is telling us discipleship is. And he has to teach us that. He has to teach them that. Honestly, it is so hard for us, but we can learn it. It is something you have to learn if you're going to be a disciple of Christ. Because it's not just bestowed upon you at your baptism. It's not. Notice what is interesting about this text today is that the disciples have already been converted to Christianity, if that's what it's called then, Christ following. They're already following Christ. They're already saying, yes, you're the guy, I get it, I'm going to do what you want. They're already converted, if you will. They're all in, but notice how their work is just beginning, even after they have given themselves over. That's, I think, the challenge for us today. Your work just begins once you give your life over to Christ. And he is not teaching them the prosperity gospel, is he? He's not teaching them your best life now. It's a code word. He is not teaching them about getting a gilded carriage or a gold Cadillac. He's teaching them about a wooden cross. That's what's going to happen with them. So best life now. So poor Joel Osteen. Yeah? Anybody know who I'm talking about? Anybody? Joel Osteen, lots of nods. Joel Osteen, this great, handsome, good-looking, tie-wearing, stadium-filling preacher, right? His family has this sort of family dynasty down in Houston, this is what happens in evangelical circles. The father, the grandfather, the grandson. Ultimately, there's this whole dynasty of people who lead this what is growing, prosperous ministry. And this is poor Joel Osteen. And I looked it up this week. Now look, I'm not against money. I'm just not. I mean, But here's the thing. You know what he's worth? His net worth? $160 million. And he's not even on he's in the top 5, but he's not the top. The top is, what was his name? He wrote a book a few years back. His name is escaping me. The top guy in that group is worth $760 million. I need a raise. Where is my senior warden? Millions of dollars. He lives in an $11 million house. I think I have the digits right. Okay, poor Joel Osteen. I feel sorry for him. Because he's just taking all this flack, right? But here's what happened. He has this huge, he bought out the arena down there where the Astros used to play. Not the Astros. The Astros? Yeah. So they used to play there. No, that's their baseball team. What's their basketball team?
No, it was basketball.
Okay, well anyway, he bought out that place, whatever it was. This great place. And if it seats tens of thousands of people, they bought that, his ministry, and he fills it every week, and he gives people this great gospel that says, listen, Jesus wants you to have your best life now. Yeah? And so that's great. But what happens when the flood came, if you've been paying attention, watching, they're right in the middle of where the people are suffering, and the doors were locked. And I'm asking you, what would it be like if the flood happened here? Would we lock our doors? Would we? I would like to think we would open our doors, even though the waters were flooding in, even though people would come in and drag mud in, even though people would come in who were dirty, even though people would come in who might steal, even though people would come in who would sleep and smell, and maybe turn this into a different kind of a place for a while. I would like to think that we would open our doors, but Joel did not, and he deserves what's happening to him right now. My question to you is, who were the real Christians this week in Houston? Was it the prosperity gospel people? It was unnamed everyday folks who risked their lives to help others. Whether or not asking any questions, are you a Christian, ma'am? If so, get in my boat, or do you look like me? Okay, I'll help you. Not asking any questions, just saying, who needs help? I'll help, right? A reporter I read this week was interviewing some unnamed man, never heard who it was, but down in all of this rain coming down, and the reporter saying to the man, what are you going to do now? And the man says, I'm going to go save some lives. Unnamed people, everyday folks, are the Christians. Celebrities, a guy by the name of J.J. Watt. He's a defensive lineman for the football team in Houston. Now I'm all confused. What do they call their football team? Thank you. I'm losing my mind. It's not that I don't care about football. I just don't know that. Anyway, J.J. Watt, defensive lineman, he started an online giving ministry with $100,000 of his own money. And he wanted to raise $200,000. As of the writing of this text, which was Friday, he was at $13 million. He wanted to raise $200,000. You know, people can use their celebrity for good. They really can. Not everybody does, but they could. $13 million. He wanted to raise $200,000. The first person I heard about who gave their life was an officer named Steve Perez. Got up in the morning. It's time to go to work. 4 in the morning. Didn't know that the underpass he was going under, he was filled with water, and he drove and he drowned. And he was on his way to go to work where he would go out and save people. That's what he did. Now, as I'm writing this and I'm thinking about all the ways I'm going to dog poor old Joel Osteen, I was reminded of another text where Jesus says, before you tell your neighbor to take the speck out of their eye, take the log out of your own eye. And I was reminded that I had done nothing. And so I went online and made a donation. Now, it's not going to change the world, but it was the right thing to do. When the flood happens, where will we be? Will we write a check? Will we save a life? Would we even go into the place where our own life is at danger? Will we run away? Will we avert our eyes? Or will we follow Christ into the place of suffering? Here's what I can tell you about discipleship. Forget wealth. Forget fame. Forget notoriety. Focus on Christ. Focus on following Christ. Imagine every time something happens in your life where you might be able to help someone, imagine Jesus as the reporter saying, what are you going to do now? Will your response be, I'm going to go save some lives?